So tonight, while Pastor Matt is away, he's asked if I would take the class, and he knew the topic that I wanted to talk about. I don't think we are quite at this point, but this is in 570 on our timeline. And so tonight we're going to be talking about the birth of Islam and what transpired in the establishment of that religion, which is now a major world religion, and how that has had a major impact. Thank you, Vic. Yeah, I couldn't do it without you. And so we're going to look at 570 when Islam comes on the scene. The Israelites had to deal with so many different things in their lives. The Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, and this ite and that ite and the other ite. And but later in history, as Christianity has been established and is blooming, and so is Judaism, then Islam comes on the scene as probably the third major world religion, and today we can talk about maybe 7 world religions. So those are minarets. If you go to Cairo, Egypt, it's known as the city of 1,000 minarets, and you will hear the call to worship in Arabic all over the city, and they're not synchronized. So you hear the one, and then you hear the next one, and you hear the next one, so it can go on for quite some time. But the prayer, of course, is a major facet of Islam. What am I doing? Which one am I supposed to hit? Which I did do, but okay. So who was Muhammad? Muhammad, you could say, was a shepherd, and he was born in Mecca in 750. I put DC. I think we say AD, the year of the Lord. So it's after the death of Jesus, right? So he was orphaned at the age of 6. He was raised by his grandfather. Then he was raised by his uncle. He married an older woman who was a merchant. Her name is Khadija. And he began to have these dreams, and that's what Ramadan is all about, the celebration of the dreams of Muhammad. And it's raining outside. Praise the Lord. We need it. And so during the height of those prayers, he began to become a monotheist, believing in one God. And he was surrounded by people who were polytheists, who believed in many different gods. And as he began to preach the message of a single God, he was rejected, he was persecuted, he fled for his life. And so in 622, he went to Medina. Medina is an Arabic word that just means city, but that's also the name of a city which was maybe no more than, less than 100 miles away from Mecca. Hijra means flight, and so that's when he fled and went to Medina, and he established then the religion of Islam. Islam meaning submission, and so it was submission to God, to Allah. If you are a good Muslim, then anytime you mention the name of Muhammad or one of the prophets, then you'll say, peace be upon him. He was a religious leader, but we may think of him more as a military conqueror. So the way he expanded Islam was not through peaceful means, but through wars, as he conquered one tribe after another tribe and enforced Islam upon the people. If they were unwilling to accept it, they could be considered second-class citizens, and they had to pay a special tax. And many people, in order to avoid the tax and to avoid death, converted to Islam. How did it spread? You can just see it. Look at this map, and from 632 on up, you have all of these movements, conquests, expansion. For Muslims, they look at this as the expansion of Islam. We look at it as periods of conquest. And it went all over, starting in Arabia, and of course that's where Mecca and Medina are, in Saudi Arabia today, the Arabian Peninsula, and then made movements. And you can see the movements went all the way into Europe. It would have, Islam would have won in conquering Europe if it hadn't been for certain significant events that took place. One was the Battle of Lepanto, in which the Moors were pushed back on the sea. I could tell you.
Moor, using the word Moor doesn't necessarily, we know what a Moor is, but.
Oh, Moor, M-O-O-R. The Moors were the Muslim blacks from North Africa, and they're the ones that came in. So you can see those two arrows on the far left, okay, there, far left. So that movement there from Africa actually goes into Spain, into the peninsula of Spain. So the Moors moved into Spain and occupied Spain for 800 years. It was known as the Conquista, the conquest. So for 800 years, the Christians began pushing the Moors back out of Spain, and that was known as the Reconquista, the reconquest. And finally, in 1492, Spain was unified under King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, and several other key things happened in that year, like in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. And because of that, then Spain became completely Christian, and he expelled the Jews and pushed the Moors out of Spain. The same thing took place in Bulgaria. That was a frontier. This was many years later, but with the Ottoman Empire, which was also Moorish, then they were able to be a barrier, you know, what do you call it, demilitarized zone, preventing further expansion of Islam. Otherwise, today, we would all be speaking Arabic, and we would all be practicing the religion of Islam. So, from 1095 until 1291, we talk about the Crusades. And it was first defense, and then it was offense. Now, in the minds of most Muslims, when they hear the word Crusades, or when they hear the word Christian, they're thinking of being opposed and pushed out. But the fact is that the Moors were the ones who needed to be pushed back. And so there was first a defense on the part of the Christians. In the minds of most Moors, we shot the first bullet. But the truth of the matter is that we were in defense of the Christian faith and trying to retake Jerusalem that had fallen into the hands of Muslims. And so many different crusades occurred, and that went on from 1095 to 1291, and there were at least 8, some say 9 different crusades that took place. So we say 8 major crusades. It was 196 years worth of battle between Christians and Muslims, and there were 3 faiths that collided, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. But look at the top. We think, okay, 196 years doesn't sound like a lot, but World War I was only 4 years. World War II only lasted 6 years. The Korean War lasted 3 years, and the Vietnam War lasted 20, 10 of which the United States was involved. So when you look at modern war, then you go back and look at the Crusades, you recognize 196 is an awful long time. And so Christianity, Islam, Judaism were fighting through this melee for many, 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 many years. As I said, in Spain alone, it was 800 years of slowly pushing the Moors back out of the country. There are many good things that came out of the Islamic invasions. They brought their culture. They knew a lot about geometry and astronomy. A lot of their words have gotten into the different languages. There were good things that came out of it, but at the same time, the fact that the goal of Islam is to make everyone a Muslim is something that we just cannot live with. So, we go from the prophet to the present time. He's born in Mecca. He receives his first revelations. He goes off in the Hijrah, he goes off to Medina. He founds the first Muslim community there. These people accept him, and there are even Jews there that accept him. So at the beginning, there was peaceful coexistence between the Muslims and the Jews. But the Jews became quite wise, and they began to see through what was being taught. And so they did not accept everything that Muhammad was declaring. And so Muhammad then turned against the Jews, and in many places they were killed.
Once again, why did the Jews turn to
Okay,
Islam?
in the first place, probably peaceful coexistence. People want peace at any cost, okay? You've heard that? And so that's one of the reasons. Another reason is they didn't understand the full intent of Islam at the time. And it could be, too, that they were maybe not really strong practicing Jews. As we will see throughout the world, as country after country fell, a lot of it was simply because of lack of passion for the Christian faith, more than through military conquest. So, does that answer your question? Yeah? Okay. Good. Okay. So, he dies. He dies, and I think it says 622. Is that what it says up there? I think so. Your eyesight's probably as good as mine. And so in 622 he dies, and he dies, there's this legal term that we use today, in state, without leaving a will. So he had never prepared for his death. I mean, he died suddenly. And so then there were two factions that began to fight against each other to see who would be the successor to Muhammad. And so civil war breaks out between the Sunnis and the Shias, or sometimes we say Shiite. The Sunnis believe in the caliphate, and so they believe that the companions of Muhammad should be the leaders. Well, the Shiites said, no, that's not the case. We want to follow the son-in-law, who is also his cousin. I'm not going to try to explain that one to you. And so that's where the imams come from. And so the world is divided up, the Islamic world is divided up between the Sunnis and the Shiites, with a few other exceptions. But it put them at war with each other, and even the way that they worship is different. So even though they will bow down, kneel down, and prostrate themselves before Allah, the Sunni touches the floor with their forehead, but the Shiites touch the floor putting their heads on a rock. And supposedly that rock then has to do with the Kaaba, which is the place that we'll be talking about in a couple of minutes. But there are those differences that exist even today between the two, and it has led to some major wars between certain Islamic countries. The names of Imajad and Abaid, these are two caliphs or chieftains who came to power and further militarily expanded Islam into other countries. And then you see the Ottoman Empire. You've heard of the Ottoman Empire. And so that comes out of Islam as well. and they ruled much of the Muslim world until it too was abolished. Wahhabi, Saud. So Wahhabism is a breakoff of Sunni religion, but it is what we would consider to be the more militaristic, dyed-in-the-wool, dare I say this? For those of you who may come from Christian Reformed or Reformed background, these are the Protestant Reformed people. You know, very, very strict, wanting to follow all the rules that they understood were taught by Muhammad, and so they're the ones that they're the terrorists, and Saudi Arabia has accepted their existence and their presence in Saudi Arabia, because you take the war out there, you do your terrorism out there, but don't do it here. Well, things have changed, and so now even in Saudi Arabia, the Wahhabis are not readily accepted. The Muslim Brotherhood rose up, and that had a major it was a major faction in Egypt. It was an Islamic rule, again, similar to the Wahhabi, and they would be delegalized, banned. They'd come back in as a legal entity. They'd be kicked out of Egypt again, and with the last dictator before his fall, well, after his fall, and what was known as the Arab Spring, then the Brotherhood was back in favor and is very much a part of the ruling party in Egypt today. You got the Iranian Revolution, okay? Remember when the Shah was kicked out? And the Soviets had invaded Afghanistan, and that was a fiasco. Well, then later, Al-Qaeda came into existence as a terrorist organization, practicing jihad. They considered it to be a religious war. But technically, according to Islam and the older versions in the Quran, only Muhammad could call for a jihad. But they use that as their excuse for waging war against Jews and Christians and others. Iran and Iraq. Iran is Sunni. Iran is Shiite. Iraq is Sunni. And if you remember, maybe 10 years ago, there was a war between those two countries. And it's basically because they come from different religions, like Reformed and Christian Reformed, and they fought each other. What's happening in the news today? Iraq is coming to the aid of Iran in this whole war that's taking place in the Middle East. So they're starting to put aside their differences, although those differences determined the relationships between those two countries for generations. So then we get, what did I do here? Yeah. Am I going the wrong direction? Okay. I don't know what I did. I kept playing with it probably. So, I'm supposed to make these announcements. Who make these announcements afterward, okay? Chuck, remind me. Okay, thanks. So now we can go on to the next slide. There are 5 pillars of Islam. These are the 5 tenets. It's like the 5 points of Calvinism, but this is for Muslims. The first is Shahada, the declaration. There is only one God, Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. And this is something that a Muslim declares readily, and if you want to become a Muslim, you have to declare that Shahada in front of 2 Muslims. This is the declaration that's whispered into the ear of a newborn, and it's what's whispered into the ear of a person who's died. So from birth until death, they have this declaration that there is only one God, Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. But then there's the salat, the 5 daily prayers. Muslims pray 5 different times during the day. We won't go into all of this. But they go through certain ablutions, the washing of the hands, the feet, the nostrils, before they can pray. They also practice, in the prayers, they will often say Allah Akbar, which you have heard used as a war cry when a terrorist is ready to blow himself up in a bus in Israel or whatever the case may be. But Allahu Akbar simply means God is greater. And so they believe that their God is greater than any other God. They have offerings. It's 2.5%. But it's not just money. It's property, whatever they may have. They need to be able to make these offerings willingly. And then prayer and the fasting during the whole month of Ramadan. It begins at dawn and ends at sunset, and then they can have a feast. And at the end of Ramadan, they have a big, big, big feast, and everybody's invited to sit in on that. During Ramadan, not only do you fast from food, you fast from sex. And so that's just a no-no during that whole month. Then there's the Hajj, which is the pilgrimage. You hear about pilgrims going to Mecca. The interesting thing is, well, this changes every year because Islam is based on a lunar calendar, not the solar calendar. And if you're out in Africa or in the Middle East at this time, you will see thousands of people at the airport on their way or coming back from Mecca. They have to go there once in your life if you're able to. You have to make that pilgrimage, and you will circle that building. There are other things other rituals that you perform, and once you have done that, you gain the name of a Hajiji, meaning that you have made your Hajj, you've made your pilgrimage.
Ain't that where they got the rock there with that black?
That's it right there, and here it is, to the right. It's called the Kaaba. Now the Kaaba was just yeah, those are people. Yeah, those are people. But the story is that Muhammad came to that stone, and it's hollow inside. There's a doorway, and there were 3 women statues inside, and he threw those out because that was part of polytheism. And it was because of that that he was chased out of Mecca, and he ended up in Medina at the beginning. And so this is considered the most sacred spot for Muslims anywhere in the world. And so if they can, at least once in their lifetime, they will make their pilgrimage to Mecca, and they will circle that stone block several times, and they feel as if they have lived up to one of the tenets of Islam. Only Muslims are allowed into Mecca. If you're caught, I don't know what would happen to you. Some people have gone in and taken pictures, and they've gotten away with it, but it's a big no-no, and you won't find me going there. But you can see there's almost a temple that's built around it, with the minarets, and you can see the thousands and thousands of people on the outside and on the inside, and eventually your goal is to get from the outside to the inside. You think you're standing in long lines at Disney World. This is much worse. So you've got the Sunnis, you get the Shiites, and you get the Sufis, and you can see. I don't know. I think this was I thought I had sent you the revised one because this is still in Spanish. The verde, the green, represents the Sunni. The azul, the blue, represents the Shiites. So you see, the Shiites are very small. They're only about 20% of the Muslims worldwide. About 80% of the Muslims are Sunnis.
Which one is more
Radical?
yeah.
Shiites. Because they believe in the 12th Imam. They believe that there's the 12th prophet is coming back. He will bring in a new age for Islam. Jesus died. He will come back to life, and he will declare that Islam is the true faith. And so in Iran, which is Shiite, under the former president, there was concern that he would blow up the world in order to bring in the 12th Imam. So that's one of the reasons why there's so much concern about Iran having nuclear power. Because their religion will allow them to do whatever it takes. And so most of the actions of a Muslim are based on their faith, and they're willing to sacrifice their life for those beliefs, much as we would, but we won't go out and kill someone. Dervish is a division of Shiites, and they dance, they twirl. They're called the twirling dervish, and they believe that they can work themselves up into an ecstasy and come into the presence of God. So they start very slowly, and they may, go around a room like a couple dancing around the room, and then they'll go faster and faster and faster. But these, I would say, are the mystics of Islam. So, this is the older one. 1.2 billion Muslims in the world, or 22%. Christians make up 33% of the population, and there's 2.9% annual growth of Muslims. See, percentage is 22% and 2.9% annual growth. I think in the other PowerPoint, it's a little bit different. The percentage of Christians in the world, I think, is now 31.2%. Not that Muslims have grown that much more, but there are other religious groups around the world. And the annual growth, I think, has dropped a little bit as well, which is good. So, what is the basic Bible, then, of Muslims? It's the Quran, supposedly given by the angel Gabriel to Muhammad as he went up into a cave and meditated, and he would say that this was the last and final revelation from God. And so it supersedes the Torah, and it supersedes the Christian Bible in the mind of Muhammad and Muslims. The thing is, Muhammad was probably illiterate and couldn't write. And so when this was actually written down, it would be coming from memory. But the Muslims feel that makes this all that much more sacred, because he was an illiterate person, and he was able to then dictate the words of God to the scribes. It has to be read in Arabic if it's going to be the Quran. So every other translation, whether it's English or Spanish or French or Swahili, it's known as the meaning of the Quran, but it's not recognized as the Quran itself. Probably 75% of Muslims worldwide do not read Arabic, and so they recite the prayers in Arabic, but oftentimes don't know what they're praying. And they may be able to pronounce words, but not necessarily know the meaning of what they're reading. So you've got a very large group, 2 billion, what did we say? 1.2 billion people in the world who claim to be Muslims, but many of them don't really know what their Bible teaches. Lots of respect for the Bible, for the Quran. They will not put it on the ground as we might do to tie our shoe. They will not highlight the Quran. They will not dog-ear it, earmark it, what do you call it? The things that we often do, and they look at us as being pagans for doing that to the holy book. They'll wash their hands before they even touch it. And in the home, they'll put it in the highest part of the home to show great respect. it's divided up into chapters called surahs, and then you've got verses that go along with it. And what are some of the differences between our Bible and the Quran? You can know God in Christ. You can't know God. God reveals himself. God only reveals his will. This is a transformative revelation. But in the Quran, God simply demands obedience. That word submission comes through again. God is Trinitarian. God is oneness. And there's no understanding among Muslims that when we speak of God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, we are also talking about a single God. And for many Muslims, if you mention the Trinity to them is God the Father, Mary, and Jesus. And so they even have a misunderstanding of what we mean when we speak of the Trinity. The Bible teaches sacrificial love. For Muslims, the Quran emphasizes power and submission to God. There are many different versions of this. I just want to say, okay, Genesis 22. What happened in Genesis 22? Abraham is tested. How was he tested?
Put his son to death.
Yeah, what was his son's name? Isaac. Well, this is one of the stories that carries over into Islam. Many stories do, because a lot of what we will find in the Quran comes from the Christian Gospels or from the Jewish Torah. But for them, Abraham was going to offer up Ishmael. So that's why they are often referred to as the sons of Ishmael. So there are all the kinds of aberrations when it comes to what the Bible teaches and how they interpret it.
So they claim Ishmael as
Their ancestor, and we would look to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Yep.
So we're kind of cousins.
Cousins, that's right. Yep. That's a term I often use. You know, we talk about we're brothers and sisters, but there are a few that are cousins out there. You know, they're not quite in the fold yet. Abrogation. Abrogation is the way in which a Muslim will be able to explain away any contradictions that they find in the Quran. Because the Quran was written in 3 different periods. Muhammad had 3 different revelations. So, what is said in the first revelation may be contradictory to what is said in the 3rd revelation. Well, they say, well, it's by abrogation, which simply means that the newest transcends the other, but we don't say that the other was wrong or that it was false, so there was a mistake. And that's a nice way to get around the contradictions that you find in the Quran. So there's no reason to argue with a Muslim about the contradictions that are found in the Quran, because they'll just say, well, it's abrogation. And that's, you've lost your argument right there. See, I did correct that. Let me explain. I took a Spanish presentation and I put it through artificial intelligence to put it in the English. And instead of saying hadiths, it says the fairies. I corrected that in the 2nd version. But anyway, the hadiths were the sayings of Muhammad and his companions. They're secondary to the Quran, because the Quran was God speaking to Muhammad through the archangel, the angel Gabriel. But these are the sayings of Muhammad and his companions that were passed down from generation to generation. It's called the lived example. And they have as much authority over the life of a Muslim as the Quran itself. Popular Islam, and you may have seen some of these, the evil eye. This is a protection against the evil eye, the amulets. The hand is the hand of Fatima, which was the daughter of Muhammad. And if you go to an airport, like in Istanbul, you will see shop after shop after shop with all of these amulets and eyes, and you see even on the back of an airplane. But that's because many Muslims practice what we call a popular Islam. The same way we can talk about folk Catholicism or folk Judaism. The traditions and superstitions have more weight with the followers of those faiths than what their scriptures say. And so many Muslims are following a folk version, a popular version of the faith, and it's often very syncretistic. It combines teachings from different groups, and so they really don't know, what true Islam is. Countries of greatest persecution. So we started back in 570 with the birth of Muhammad, the early expansion, calling it to be the one and only true religion, and that their Quran was the final revelation and the best revelation from God. Moving into the time of the caliphate, with the caliphs and then the imams from Sunnis and from Shiites, conquering the world. Constantinople falls, and it becomes what? Istanbul. The center of learning, Christian learning, fell into the hands of Muslims. And all over the Middle East and Africa, places that for centuries were Christian became Muslim. Part of it's through militarism. Part of it is simply because people didn't care. Christianity was not as strong in their hearts as it should have been. And it was easier for them to accept the invaders and accept Islam than to stand up for their faith. Now that's even taking into account all those years of the Crusades, and it all came to naught. Because little by little, territory was ceded to Islam. And now what's taking place is what we call the Islamization. So in England, you've got the Lord Mayor of London, who is a Muslim. You've got movements in Scandinavia and also in France and Italy and other places. The Mayor of New York City. And the goal is to eventually get people to accept Islam and to accept Sharia law.
Just a few days ago, I don't know if you guys heard this, but Connecticut, I believe, just passed a law to allow Islam to be taught in schools.
Yeah.
But
Texas pushed back. Yeah. They're going to send the Texas Rangers up there to...
But look at Dearborn.
Dearborn, Michigan.
Dearborn
Dearborn
is a mess.
is probably 95% Muslim. They have the largest Sunni mosque, and there's a very large Shiite mosque there as well. It's one of the few cities in the United States where they can do the call to worship, Allah Akbar, from a loudspeaker in public. In most places, they're not allowed to do that. Many places, we can't even ring the church bell anymore to call people to worship. But this is what's happening. It's called the Islamization. And Saudi Arabia is behind a lot of it because they've got billions of dollars from oil to invest in building mosques and building schools, in providing food for the poor in these different countries. And so a lot of people are what do we used to say, rice Christians? Now they're rice Muslims because they're accepting the help that they're getting, and they're willingly turning to Islam.
One of the things, you've got left to do that, but
I'm almost done, so that's okay.
well, one of the things I think that we're all, or many are of our nation, it's like, well, God is God. Allah is God. You call him Allah, and we call him God, but it's the same God.
Right. And we know it's not, because according to the Quran, it gives a certain picture of God. God who only requires submission. He's not a God of mercy, a God of love, a God of sacrifice, who willingly sent his son to the cross for our sins. And so they're not the same. Now, these are the same arguments I used to have with liberals. I grew up in a liberal church, and he would say, our God's, we believe in the same God. We're Christians too, but they were not practicing Christians, that he didn't believe in the vicarious atonement, that Jesus actually died in our place. When we were living in Costa Rica, there was the director of the Mormon Church in Central America living there, and he often would say to me when we get together for PTA meetings, well, we're both Christians. Well, maybe in name, but in practice and in theology, we're worlds apart. And so we have to recognize the fact that Allah and God are not the same. But
Allah means God.
right, it's Arabic. It means God, and God before Islam in the Arabic world was Allah. But now they have taken that and said, well, you can't use that. If you go to Malaysia, Christians are not able to have the word Allah in their Bible because they claim that is only for Muslims. And what was I going to say about that?
But the Arabic word.
Yeah, it simply means God, and but it's a world of difference between the Allah of the Quran and the Allah of the Bible. Now, persecution. So we saw the expansionism that took place over centuries, the great battles that were fought, the Crusades, 8 of them for all those years, and then we see further expansion and taking over country after country, the Islamization that's taking place, the desire to see Sharia law become the law of the land. In the 2026 World Watch List, it talks about globally, 388 million Christians face high levels of persecution and discrimination for their faith, roughly 1 in 7 worldwide. 4,849 Christians were killed for their faith during the 2026 reporting period up until now. If you follow the news, and if the news was faithful in reporting the news, you heard about all the decapitations of Nigerian Christians, entire villages that were wiped out by the Fulani tribesmen. In the sub-Saharan Africa, that's the deadliest region, resulting in or accounting for most of the violence. Nigeria alone saw 3,490 Christian deaths, about 75% of the global total, largely from Islamic groups such as Boko Haram, is a term you may have heard, ISWAP, and the Fulani militias. And it continues to go on. Our director in Nigeria for West Africa lives in the north, and that's where Muslims are predominant and very much, in jeopardy one day to the next.
But you hear that there's more of a movement, Christian movement in those countries
Yeah.
than there is in our own country.
Sure. Tertullian, wasn't it Tertullian that said the church grows in the blood of martyrs? And so we see that the family's on their way. And so we see that
I spammed. I
Oh.
must be saying something I shouldn't say.
so yeah, I lost my thought.
I'm
Okay,
sorry.
that's all right.
Do that too.
Other countries where there's high persecution from Muslims, in Somalia, Yemen, Sudan, Syria, Pakistan, Libya, Iran, and Afghanistan. The Somali Muslims chased the Christians out of the country and forced them into Kenya. And they're being chased by the terrorist group called Al-Shabaab. And this has been going on for maybe, I think, the last 10 years with Somali.
One of the things I think is the most frightening, though, is the way the Muslims are moving into Europe, into the United States too. I mean, so many coming in and getting into positions of power.
Yeah.
And I mean, where we live in Spain, and we're there for the winter, we
not necessarily, faithfully practicing their faith, but they are Muslim. And if you follow the news lately, this place called Ceuta, Ceuta, in which all of these Africans are crossing in, Moroccans are crossing into Spain. And Spain said, no, we can't have it. And Sanchez, who's the prime minister, could lose his job because he hasn't been strong enough. But they're forcing thousands and thousands of these Moroccans to go back across the border because it's one of the few land borders.
Ceuta is a city, a Spanish city in Africa.
Yeah, they speak Spanish.
Well, it's a Spanish city.
Yeah, and so
So the Morocco, they border Morocco, and so they can just walk across the border.
yeah. So here in America, we have 3 Muslims in Congress. That's Ilhan Omar from Minnesota. We have one here in Michigan. There's an Abdul who's running for office. I don't know if he's a practicing Muslim, but that certainly is an Arabic name. Senator. And then there's one in Indiana. And so there is a move even in the U.S. to Islamicize our country and to even in the halls of government in Washington, little by little. So as Christians, we have an obligation to pray, to speak up, to defend our religion, and we're not going to go on a crusade like they did, but we need to be aware of what's happening and where places are allowing Islam to be taught in the schools. We need to speak up if we're in that city.
And in Michigan, it's not just Dearborn, too, because Hamtramck even had a completely Muslim city council before Dearborn did.
Did they?
Is that right?
Okay, I didn't know that. Yeah, yeah,
And they do the call to worship
yeah. Also,
in Hamtramck as well.
okay. Chuck?
So if a Muslim converts to Christianity, what could happen to that person?
At the very least, they could be ostracized. They could be chased out of their country. They would lose their job. They would lose their kids. They could lose their head. And it's not a pretty sight, but many people are willing to make that sacrifice. We call them believers of Muslim background, or Muslim background believers is a new term. It used to be BMB, now it's MBB. And there are ministries that are working with those who have come out and to help them, protect them, hide them, provide for them, get them out of the country, get them into a Christian church where another group can work with them. But yeah, it's a high cost for a person who accepts Christ. I could go on for hours with this, but I won't. In one of our books called A World of Gods, there's a whole chapter on how to do church planting among Muslims. And there's a lot about the background, the culture, the theology, and 5 or 6 different ways in which you can converse with a Muslim in language that they would understand with the possibility of their coming to faith in Christ. So it's not a lost cause, but it is very, very difficult for a Muslim to accept the Christian faith and to see Jesus Christ as the Son of God, the second person of the Trinity. So a Muslim is one who submits. They may look like the women on the left. The interesting thing is that's not it. Oops.
I don't know, did you mention that? I think also their whole culture, family turns their back on.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, mom, dad, grandpa.
Yeah.
I mean,
They're dead.
they're dead.
They
Yeah.
are dead to
yeah.
the
Yeah,
Muslim family.
that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, a friend of mine is known as the grandpa of the believers of Muslim background. He's Egyptian, and he came to the States to study. And for years, he could not go back to Egypt because he was a wanted person. And even his family, if they knew he was there, would turn him in or would kill him. It's gotten to the point now where they accept him. He may go in the dark of night to see his family. They receive him. Some of his family members have even come to the United States to visit him. But for years and years, he could not go back. It would have been a death sentence for him. Sharia law, and this is what happens: stoning, beheadings, floggings. And look at that little boy. He probably stole something, and they're running over his arm with a car. So, do we want to be followers of a God of love and mercy who sacrificed his own self, his son for us? Or do we want to submit to a religion that is unmerciful? It keeps saying, God is merciful, God is merciful. And time again in the Quran, it repeats that because they're trying to convince themselves that God is a God of mercy. And we need to point them to the true God of mercy. So what began in 570 has not ended yet. Pete?
Have you ever seen the book Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus?
Yes.
I have it at home.
Yes.
Wonderful story
Yeah.
about a brilliant Muslim
Yeah.
kid. He like graduated from medical school when he was 19 or something. I have the book.
Yeah.
Wonderful
Yeah.
story about a Muslim kid who became a believer. And he was influenced highly by a very, very good friend who was a very committed Christian. And they were in medical school together. But the young man, he died at
Yeah. Cancer.
age 33, I think.
Yeah, just a few years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
kind of, don't know really why.
Yeah.
But it's really a cool story about this Christian student, his friend, how he shared Christianity with him, and this guy would bring up Islam, and the Christian guy could say, well, what about, and the young man eventually realized what Christianity was compared to Islam.
Right.
It's really a neat story.
Yeah.
Seeking Allah, finding Jesus.
Yeah.
You
He's.
know, we live in an area where we think, well, we're here,
What kind of
West
skill
Michigan,
out here?
what do we have any problem? But there are a lot of Muslims at Ferris.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I had him in class.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Lots of them.
Yeah.
There's opportunity if we seek it.
Yeah.
If I tried to share Jesus with them, they quit.
Yeah. But
Quit the class? Yeah, quit school.
Yeah.
Quit, leave our program.
Yeah. That's why it
Yeah.
So,
I did.
So-
And I saw several of them leave.
yeah. So, yeah.
So
It-
defend in a circle.
you have to.
Because their book said so. How
Right.
can you go in a
Right.
discussion in that position?
Which is why you have to build a relationship. And once you've got the relationship, they're more open to hearing the gospel. You first ask them to share their religion, and every Muslim is willing to do that. But then you can reciprocate. And it doesn't just happen overnight. He spoke at a conference in Grand Rapids and died the next year.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
That was wonderful to hear him.
Yeah.
This is a great book.
Yeah, it is.
I had a kid one time. This is a true story. His name was Turkey Hussein. And great kid. He grew up in Florida. His father was in the Saudi Arabian Army stationed at, or Air Force, stationed at England Air Force Base. So he was fluent in English, and he went through our program. Brilliant kid. And he made it all the way through. And he was one of the few kids that you could talk Jesus with him. And I'll read your Bible, and I gave him a Bible. And I don't know what ever happened to him, but he really was a nice young man. But he probably was a Sunni.
Mhm.
And Saudi Arabia is mostly Sunni, aren't they? It's Iran and Iraq
Yeah.
that are Shiite.
No, Iran is Shiite.
Sunni, Iran is
Shiite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're very, very interesting people. I had an opportunity to go to Guyana, South America, which is in the northern part of South America, several times.
Right, right. As long as you talk about Isa al-Masih, Jesus the Messiah, you can't mention Christ because that reminds them of the Crusades. But Isa is one of their prophets. And so if you talk about Isa, then you have listening ears.
Jesus, they just believe he was a prophet.
Just a prophet. Yeah, yeah, just a prophet. So, having said that, we'll go to the announcements and then we'll have a closing prayer. So the announcements, we do have a town meeting this coming Sunday, August 16th, at 11:45 after our time of cookies and coffee. And then Pastor Aaron will be teaching this Sunday morning from the pulpit. Men's study at the Broken Wheel Ranch will be next week, Tuesday evening at 6:30. I'll be somewhere between Grand Rapids and Phnom Penh. I don't know where I'll be. So I can't be there, Chuck. And we need to keep Cam Dunning in our prayers. He's home from the Cleveland Clinic, but he's in a lot of pain constantly. His mother, Amy, will need to return to work next week, and she's very concerned about that, and finances are still a big concern for them as well. So those are the announcements. Bob, could you close us in prayer, please?